5, actually, Richard. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'll give you my
Shall I start?
Yeah. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, well, the first two applications this afternoon, I'm a member of the board of Monmouth Housing Association, whose applications these are.
Councillor Evans?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm sitting on the committee of Monmouthshire Housing, so I'll have to declare and leave the room.
Thank you. Councillor Webb?
The same reason, second chairman.
And Councillor Roger Harris at the back?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm acquainted with the owner of the Premier store just down the road from the application DC 01513.
Thank you. Councillor Wintle?
I'm a director of Monmouthshire Housing, items DC, what, treble 03738.
Thank you. Sorry, it was remiss of me. I haven't introduced myself and the old members here and officers. County Councillor Ruth Edwards, Chair of the Planning Committee. To my right.
County Councillor Peter Clark, Vice Chairman.
Robert Tranter, the Head of Legal Services and Temporary Monitoring Officer.
Thank you.
I'm Philip Thomas, I'm Development Control Manager, so in other words I manage the team that deal with planning applications.
Paula Clark, Planning Control Manager.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services Officer.
Mark Davis, Traffic and Development Manager.
Thank you all very much for that. We'll now go on to item 3 on the agenda to confirm the accuracy of the planning meeting minutes on the 3rd of March. Page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and page 8. Could I have a show of hands then, please? Thank you. I will sign them at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Now we go on to the planning applications on item agenda 4. No, not the first one. No. There's public speaking on this one.
Mr. Chairman, you have the next rearrangement.
Oh, sorry, we're going to go to Caldecott first on page 17 because we have public speaking. We generally like to have the public to do their speaking first rather than wait through. And also, will all members please be aware that we may not be live streaming. They're working on it, so we could be, we might not, we might be. So please be aware of that. Thank you. Okay. Who's presenting it? You, Phil, or Paula? Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks permission for the demolition of existing garages and the erection of a residential bungalow at Kaymar Grove, Caldecott. The site is owned by Monmouthshire Housing Association, whose primary purpose is to provide, maintain and manage affordable housing in the county for those in housing need. This is the photographs on the screen of the site. You can see the garages there with some existing accesses. Concrete garages, that's the access into Kaymar. And just the next one, Phil. Just another view of the garages. With the, with the lane to the public footpath at the rear. There's currently 13 single-storey garages arranged around the edge of the site with a central area of hard standing. The proposal is to demolish the garages and build a 2-bedroom wheelchair-accessible bungalow. Vehicular access from Green Kaymar will be retained, along with access to numbers 31 and 32 Kaymar and the Scout Hut, and the pedestrian access to the public footpath will also be retained. The application site is within the settlement boundary, therefore under policy S1 of the LDP, there's a presumption for residential development subject to detailed planning considerations. As the proposal is for one affordable housing unit, it contributes to the housing provision for Caldicot identified in policy S2 and the affordable housing provision sought by policy S4. The proposed bungalow has been designed to reflect the surrounding dwellings with red brick and render finishes. That's the property proposed there on the screen. It will be single storey, set away from all boundaries, and will not result in a loss of privacy to the neighbours. There's been concern that the loss of garaging will result in more on-street parking. However, the garages are currently underused, and it's unlikely that there will be a detrimental impact on the local highway network. During yesterday's site visit, it was noted that the properties in the immediate locality have off-street parking provision within their own properties. There's no highway objection to the proposal. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you, Paula. The ward member isn't here to speak today, although he didn't wish to anyway, but the adjoining member is here. But as he's the adjoining member to this ward, he asked if he could speak after the town council. So I will give liberty for the town council to speak first, please. You have 4 minutes to state your name and...
Right, good afternoon everybody. I'll introduce myself and Councillor Maria Stevens, Town Council for representing Caldicot Town Council this afternoon on Green Lane Ward. I'll explain Caermar Grove. Caermar Grove is a narrow cul-de-sac within the Green Lane Ward of Caldicot. Highway Matters 5.4 on application states, no alternative parking is proposed for existing leases. We would like to know why is this? Residents who lose their garage space will need to find alternative parking within the present congested roads of the area, which will exacerbate the problem. The garage area also serves as a safe turning point for drivers of large and small vehicles because of the difficulties involved in trying to turn in the cul-de-sac. Caldicot Scouts store their scouting equipment in the hut at the far end of the site, which they regularly need vehicle access to. I note that on page 17, 1.5 of the agenda, it states the Scouts building and numbers 31 and 32 Caermar Grove will have a shared driveway. Are all parties aware of this, please? And will their access be compromised while demolition and construction takes place? Finally, I'd like to make this point on behalf of town councillors. Why couldn't these garages have been maintained to be user-friendly and where residents could be encouraged to use them in safety instead of adding to already congested areas of Caldicot? And it seems excessive to demolish 13 garages to be replaced by one single property. I would ask the committee, please, to carefully consider these points before making any decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Eason? You will have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I have had representations made. I'm the adjacent ward member to this particular ward. I've had representations made to me by residents in my ward against this proposal in view of the fact that Monmouthshire County Council's planning officers are recommending approval. My residents in my ward are seeing the same application coming to them in the near future. There's 250 garages in my ward, of which 52 are under present consideration for some sort of development. So the residents in my ward are concerned other to the points that Councillor Stevens has said regarding access, etc., and should you as a committee support this application as it stands without looking at the wider aspects of what the decisions you need to be looking at in terms of for example, if there were quite a few properties being built, it would release Section 106 monies in a possibility. So I am come to you on the basis that regarding this application, you will come to a view, but I believe that you should, before you come to this, consider the wider effects that these demolitions of garages will have on the wider concern, particularly in my ward, where there are 250 garages, of which, as I say, 52 are under consideration. It's a thin end of the wedge as far as my residents are concerned, and I think that I believe that you should look at as I say, the wider implications of just taking garages down. The residents in my ward, particularly in the two areas which they believe is being considered, have exactly the same concerns that have been expressed by Councillor Stevens. So really and truly, they'll be coming back. I'll be saying the same thing in the near future. That's all I need to say on the matter, and I don't think I need to speak on the next application because it's the same argument. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Easton, but I much stress that all members of the committee deal with the application that is in front of them here today, not what might be or hearsay from anybody else on a different site. We are dealing with the application as you went to see yesterday, and we will deal with that application today. Thank you. Would like to start speaking now that we're there yesterday? Councillor Jim Higginson.
The applicant's agent.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you were there. Thank you. You also have 4 minutes and state your name, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name's Stefan Harris. I'm the planning consultant of Asprey Planning, acting on behalf of the applicants, Monmouthshire Housing Association. The application, as you know, seeks approval for the construction of a wheelchair-accessible bungalow in the place of 13 garages in various states of use and disrepair. The officer's report before you is a balanced and detailed report that I trust will have left you with a clear picture of the proposal and the key issues. The report covers all the relevant aspects of the application concisely and fairly, and I believe it arrives at the logical conclusion, which is to recommend approval of the application. In summary of the application, I intend to cover the main aspects of the development, but I'll pay particular attention to car parking because that appears to be the main point of contention. The site is located within the settlement boundary for Caldecott in the adopted local development plan. There is therefore a presumption in favour of development as long as all material considerations are addressed. In addition, the reuse of brownfield land in sustainable locations is entirely in line with the principal aspiration of Planning Policy Wales. The principle of the development is therefore not in any doubt. In terms of parking, it's worth noting that in addition to the objection by the Town Council, only 2 neighbours formally objected to the proposals. The one common theme for objections stated in all 3 responses is car parking. It's interesting to note that Monmouthshire County Council's Highways Department offered no objection to the proposal. Further to this, councillors will have noted the garage audit that was submitted in support of the application. This showed that of the 13 garages on site, only 5 are used for the parking of cars. 4 of these vehicles are associated with properties on Kymar Grove, and the 5th to a resident on Newport Road. There are 2 considerations to bear in mind when car parking spaces are displaced. Firstly, whether car parking can be accommodated elsewhere, and secondly, how the highway network will be affected. In respect to the first point, Kymar Grove is characterised by dwellings with off-street parking on plot, and is a cul-de-sac with no parking restrictions on the road. Similarly, the adjacent Longcroft Road benefits from no parking restrictions. In this respect, the parking displacement is considered to be able to be accommodated adjacent to or within reasonable distance from respective homes. Likewise, most properties on Newport Road have on-plot parking spaces. In respect to the impact on the local highway, 4 cars will remain on Kymar Grove, and as an additional 2 may be created by the proposed development, it would mean that there will effectively only be a maximum net gain of 1 car using the highway on Kymar Grove. 1 additional car on Newport Road will similarly not cause any detrimental impact to the highway. The acceptability of the loss of the garages is therefore considered acceptable, as stated in the committee report. Moving on to the Town Council's objection, they also state a concern over the lack of amenity space for children to play. The current site offers no formal play space, and the proposed site has an ample rear garden. More importantly, the dwelling is proposed as a wheelchair-accessible home for elderly persons, so play space is not exactly a key consideration in this respect. In terms of other issues, it should be noted that Monmouthshire Housing Association has ensured through consultation with the Scouts that access to their hut has been retained. In addition, the public footpath to the rear of the site will have a better outlook than it currently does, as it's backed onto by the existing garages. In respect of housing need, there are 476 households on the waiting list for properties in Caldecott, including 46 OAP households. This development would therefore help the housing figures, and Monmouthshire Housing Association has earmarked a specific elderly couple for this property. I don't propose to go into design or amenity impact because these factors appear to be satisfactory to all parties. Therefore, I'll conclude by saying that the proposed development of one much-needed wheelchair-accessible home in place of a dilapidated and/or disused garages is considered to be sound in planning policy, design and land use terms. In light of the above, I would therefore hope that you follow your office's recommendation and grant consent for this development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I will now go to Jim Higginson. Councillor Jim Higginson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, as we've heard, we were there yesterday, and there's out of the garage there, only 5 occupied. There's weeds growing up around the rest, and clearly doors have not been open for quite some time. Strangely enough, and there were a number of residents there yesterday, none of them were against the development. Their concerns were of the access to properties around there, or the access to the footway and the Scout Hall. And there's none of that is going to be, there's nothing going to happen there. It's going to be detrimental to either the access to the footway or indeed to the Scout Hall. And as a consequence of that, I don't think that there's anything wrong with this application, because if you look at those garages, I mean, the best thing that can happen to them, to be quite blunt about it, is they'd be demolished. They're an eyesore, and maybe not recently, I have to say, but at times in the past, and I'm going to repeat this later on, there have been issues around there, you know, where things are alleged to have happened. So, I mean, the fact that the garages, on the one hand, are there, 13 of them, only 5 of them are being used, and we don't even know who the tenants of those garages are. We don't know if they live on Kymau Grove, or they could live on Newport Road, because Newport Road is to the back of there. So, and I mean, the tenants' concerns, the immediate tenant, were of on-street parking, but I don't think that's going to be a big problem there. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Higginson. Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Watts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Higginson. It was quite evident from the visit yesterday that there's very little use of this site. I agree with the councillor from Caldecott Town Council that they are in a terrible condition. They are quite unsightly. That is a responsibility of Monmouthshire Housing, of course, not Monmouthshire County Council. And there is a problem with regard to on-street parking there, although I noticed that a lot of people have solved that by utilising their front gardens. It was interesting to note that although a lot of people had made their hard standings in their front gardens, they still park their cars half on the pavement and half on the road. I'm not quite sure that was probably a convenience issue. I believe that the access is adequately retained. The actual access to the storage in the Scout Hut is not actually part of this application because it's not within the red line. And there's also plenty of room there on the occasions that a vehicle needs to get in there to turn. In fact, it's probably easier under these plans than it was with the site as it currently is. I think there is a point with regard to the narrowness of the road and large vehicles, and I'm sure construction management plan will take care of any highways issues there. So on the balance of everything we saw yesterday, I would agree with Councillor Higginson that we should approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Watts?
Thank you, Chair. I was there at the site yesterday, and the residents were there with some cars parked on the roadway, but they also have a nice green area where they could park if necessary. But it was not suitable, right, for those cars to be parked there because you could still not pass. One vehicle could not pass another one. They need to stay in the area where the garages are.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Harris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had this problem every single time we have a development, and we're busy talking about parking of cars, and we spend much more time on that subject than thinking about housing people who are in obvious housing need. Wherever you go, there is not enough parking space, so we need to just knock that one on the head. We're going to have this argument the whole time. Now, I've got a similar development in my ward. There were 14 garages. They're no longer being used now, but there's some lovely housing, affordable housing gone up there that are going to help people on the waiting list in the Abergavenny area. And it's been mentioned by Councillor Watts that there are some greens around in the area. I would advise Monmouthshire Housing to have a survey of residents around some of those greens as to whether or not they would be amenable to some of the green, if not all of the green, to be taken up and used for parking. And I think if you do that exercise, you'll be surprised that the majority of the residents will say, please keep it as a green. But that I would think if Monmouthshire Housing did that exercise, then the residents around would actually know the outcome. On the balance of things, I have to agree that the site is an eyesore. Most of the garages, we're not quite sure what they're being used for, and that's another thing that comes up in wards like mine that have got lots of these garage areas. They're used for all sorts of other purposes other than parking cars. So I would certainly put my hand up for this development to go ahead. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Brian Strong.
Yes, Madam Chairman, just to reiterate really what Roger Harris has said, it is important that disabled people do have suitable accommodation. It's an eyesore there. I think it will be a big improvement to the area. The only problem is the possible car park issue, but in all fairness, most of the houses have already got 2 spaces in front of the house without parking on the road, so I would be in favour of this application.
Thank you very much indeed, all councillors. I do think that perhaps it's like many things in life, it's either use it or lose it. And of course, the maintenance of these garages would be, well, insurmountable, and I think it's far better myself to house people rather than the cars. Even on new estates where they do have garages, the cars aren't very often parked in a garage then. So I would like the local member isn't here, but who would like to move for approval? Councillor Higginson, do you have a seconder? Councillor Murphy, could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's 9-4, Chairman.
Those against? Councillor Watts is against. Thank you.
The application is approved, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now go on to page 22, again in Caldecott.
Thanks, Chair. This is a similar application by Monmouthshire Housing Association for the demolition of existing garages and the construction of 4 one-bedroom flats at Green Lane, Caldecott. This is another one that we visited yesterday. That's the access into the garage court. There's 2 rows of 6 garages in the centre of the site. And that's a small red brick building at the back, which is not used. And there is existing... Yeah, there's an existing access to one property on the left and another property to the right-hand side of that building, which are going to be retained. The same policies apply to this scheme as the previous application. There are 12 garages on site. The proposal is to erect a 2-storey building containing 4 affordable apartments. Each unit would have its own parking space plus 1 visitor space with a communal amenity area to the rear, enclosed by a 1.8 metre close-boarded fence and a landscaped area at the front. That's the site there. showing the accesses to the existing properties will be retained. And if you see the elevations, Phil, that's a floor plan, and that's the proposed block of 4 one-bedroom flats. The building has been designed to reflect the surrounding development with detailing of porches, materials of brick and cream render. The proposed building will not directly face the properties to the rear, and there are good separation distances between the proposed building and existing dwellings. Therefore, there's no neighbour amenity problems there. There are no highway objections to the proposal. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application subject to the conditions outlined in the report. And we'll also add in a condition about construction management plan as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Would you like to speak again on behalf of Town Council? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, this is an objection from Caldicot Town Council and me today being a representative on Green Lane Ward. A short walk from Kymar Grove, 12 garages could be demolished, again with no extra parking facilities in the area, only those of the new properties. Residents from the nearby properties have verbally aired their concerns to me about access to their properties while the demolition and construction takes place. It seems that our local garages are up for demolition in an ad hoc perspective. A total of 25 in this and the previous planning application garages could be demolished. The average household today own 2 cars. So where will they all park? Probably not in Caldicot, we'll have no space. Please consider this before you make your planning decisions. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Do you wish to speak again, please? Yes, please. Right, thank you. You also have 4 minutes on this application.
Thank you, Chair. This application, as you know, has a number of aspects in common with Kymar Grove, including the nature and the objection comments received. With this in mind, you'll excuse me if there is a little bit of repetition, but each application obviously has to be considered on its own merits. Again, the site is located within the settlement boundary for Caldicot, and that means there's, again, a presumption in favour of development as long as all material planning considerations are addressed. It's worth noting on this one that there was no neighbour objections. The only objection received, and the reason it's before you today, is because of the objection from the Town Council. As per Kymar Grove, however, there was no objection from the Highways Department within Monmouthshire County Council. Again, a garage audit was submitted in support of the Green Lane application. Of the 12 garages, that showed that only 2 are known to be used for the parking of cars. There were 3 garages that were inaccessible, so they could potentially store an additional 3 cars, but they're equally likely to be vacant. Of the 2 garages containing cars, one is associated with the property on Green Lane, and the other linked with the residence on Newport Road. So again, as per Kymar Grove, there's 2 considerations to bear in mind: the displacement of the car parking and the effect of the cars that are displaced on the highway network. Bearing in mind that we're only aware of 2 cars being displaced, I think it's reasonable to assume that the effect of this on car parking and on the highway network is going to be negligible. That's supported, of course, by the fact that Highways didn't object to the application. The Town Council issued the same objection to Kymar Grove as they did to Green Lane. So to address the concern that they mentioned on amenity space for children to play, again, the current site offers no formal play space, and the proposal is for 4 one-bedroom flats, not family homes. Notwithstanding this, the proposed site does have a sufficiently sized communal garden to the rear. Therefore, this comment is not considered to be a concern in planning terms, which is clearly stated in the committee report. In terms of other issues, it should be noted that Monmouthshire Housing Association has again ensured that 3 of the neighbouring dwellings' access has been retained. And in terms of housing needs, again, I reiterate the number of households on the waiting list. There's 476 properties waiting for households in Caldicot. That includes up to 157 one-bedroom flats. So this development will therefore go some other way to helping the housing figures. Again, I don't propose to discuss design or amenity issues because those appear to be satisfactory. So I'll conclude again by saying that the proposed development will provide 4 much-needed one-bedroom flats in the place of dilapidated and or disused garages. Monmouthshire Housing Association owns the site and has a duty to provide housing to the people of Monmouthshire. Car parking will always be an issue, as Councillor Harris mentioned, but providing houses to people should surely take precedent over this. I believe that the main points of contention have therefore been addressed, so I hope that you follow your officer's recommendation and grant consent for this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Tony Easton, Councillor Easton, do you wish to speak again? Thank you. I'll leave it open to members now, but we have got two officers which we're all aware of. Sorry, in front, Shirley and Mark from Highways, if you wish to ask them any questions. Thank you. Councillor Higginson, did you wish to speak first, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excuse me. Checking. Yeah, again, there's only a couple of the garages used. It is off the main highway, admitted, but there. I mean, I'm looking at the objection to the proposal on the grounds of lack of amenity area for children to play, and on highway grounds. There are only 4 units there, 4 cars. If there's a dozen garages there now, there'd be more than 4 cars. And in relation to children having looking for places for children to play, there's not going to be any children there, I wouldn't think. These are the single persons accommodation, which are hugely in demand, I have to say, particularly in Caldicot. And as a consequence of that, I don't think there's any issue that I could object to on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higginson. Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Higginson. There's very little sign of use there. The garages, again, are in a very poor state. Paula has already said there's going to be a construction management plan, so we can safeguard the access to the other grounds. In terms of amenity space, there's a very large open area, not 100 yards from this site by the health centre. I don't see any planning grounds for refusal, so I should be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Anybody else? Councillor Watts?
Thank you, Chair. One thing nobody is mentioning is the amount of children that would be able to play on that village green, Caldicot Town Council green, whatever, and if the children got somewhere to play and those cars are in their garage, you stand a better chance of looking after the children.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Anybody else wish to speak? No, I'd ask for someone to move. Councillor Higginson wishes to move approval. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Murphy again. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's 9 for the application, Chairman.
Those against? Councillor Watts.
The application's approved.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
please, Right, thank you, members. We now go to page 3.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah. So this is approval of reserve matters, layout, scale, external appearance, access and landscaping relating to the residential element of the site as permitted by Outline Planning Permission 2008-00818 at Westgate, Merthyr Road, Llanfoist. So the site, which covers 9.2 hectares, has been allocated in development plans since 1990 for industrial and business development, and is a current planning permission as a business park with industrial units, a cattle market and lorry park. The application site was increased to include land adjacent to the heads of the Valley Trunk Road, the A465, previously allocated as an area of amenity importance, and as a result of the increase in the size of the site, an area of land measuring approximately 1.6 hectares on that part that you see in the photo there, or at least some of it. That was granted outline consent for residential development in 2010 under that DC 2008-00818 application. Following this outline consent, reserve matters consent for the detailed layout and appearance of the housing, which was submitted under the Charles Church wing of Persimmon Homes, was granted planning permission in September 2013 for 44 houses. And that consent is extant, but this new application, the current one, now relates to a replan of the permitted housing site. The proposed residential development would now comprise 65 dwellings with a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses. And the housing would be predominantly 2-storey, with the addition of 2.5-storey units towards the centre of the site. The revised layout seeks to meet the terms of policy DES1 of the LDP by increasing the amount of dwellings that can be achieved on the site, and would equate to around 30 dwellings per hectare to meet that policy, while allowing for appropriate public open space, landscaping, private amenity space and parking needs. The proposed redesign of the site is in response to changes in the housing market set out by the developer. The developer has advised that the market for larger properties has reduced, and to continue with the previously approved scheme, which would sell but at a slower rate, would eventually lead to an increase in costs. Therefore, to make good progress, Persimmon now propose an alternative mix of smaller dwellings which would be better suited to the current market. The design and layout mimics that of the previous approved reserve matters application. So we've just quickly run through the pictures. That's the existing housing, the sort of housing association development that the site backs onto. That's looking beyond the site into the wider countryside. And that's looking north back towards the Sugarloaf up there, and the Heads of the Valleys, which is behind the pylons. And then that's the site in context. So if I just switch one, the actual site itself is in here. It links with the existing dwellings here, which we saw yesterday. We were looking at a point about here, looking through the right-of-way which runs down here, and we protected and retained and enhanced to actually create links through to the site into the open countryside. That's the development in there. There'll be views out onto this enhanced wetland habitat, which is used by great crested newts, and the commercial development, which will, if you like, screen the site from the Heads of the Valleys, and Abergavenny is in between here. And that has already got consent for its road network under that previous 2008 application. If you remember, the hotel and the pub restaurant we approved in this area, and the current but undetermined McDonald's application is in that area. But I'll make no mention of that because that's not before us today and is still under consideration. In this interim area, there'd be either B1 or I think B2 development proposed, but we haven't got any planning applications in as yet on that intervening area there, and also similarly in here. And that's what the allocation and the development plan anticipates for that part of the site. So in terms of materials, there'll be a mix of brick, predominantly brick with some render and stone, with reconstituted slate roofs, with samples to be agreed prior to development commencing. Headers and subsills with barge board overhangs are provided to improve the appearance of the proposed houses. The road surfacing will also be varied to help the legibility of the site, and all of the existing trees on the boundary of the site will be retained and will form part of the wider Great Crested Newt mitigation strategy and landscaping scheme. The trees that are to be retained in the gardens of the proposed affordable dwellings will be managed by a private management company rather than the housing association to be involved in the scheme. Just look further on at the layout. So that's the layout into the site. The housing association properties are situated in this area and then in this area here. And there's 13 in total. The previous scheme, there were nine units. In terms of the wider impact, the proposed dwellings will be visible from vantage points of the higher ground that surrounds Abergavenny, from the Blorange as part of the World Heritage Site, for example, or partially visible from Abergavenny Castle. In both cases, however, views will be distant and will be against a backdrop of the existing Gypsy Lane housing development. And when viewed from the castle, the site will be screened by proposed and existing planting on the cutting below Llanfoist Farm, as well as the business development that is proposed between the housing and the A465. Significant effort has also gone into providing additional landscaping to mitigate the impact of the development, which has been tied into the requirements for biodiversity, as I mentioned, the Great Crested Newt wildlife corridors and links to this wetland area down below. The large pond with an associated wetland or car area adjacent to the site, which is known to support the newts, is to remain undeveloped, with additional planting around the lagoon, together with measures to protect the population of newts that were found to be present. The site has been designed so as to ensure that privacy distances between the existing and proposed dwellings on the southeastern corner of the site are maintained to at least 20 metres, although there is already a significant tree and hedge buffer along the boundary which is to be retained and enhanced in places. The site is also significantly lower than the existing housing which we noted yesterday. The existing housing in Samuel Salford Close is a good few metres above this area, as is this area in Thomas Hill Close, I think, in terms of this area, with a significant belt of trees in between. As with the previous approval on the site, there are 3 existing public footpaths that cross the site, and where necessary, these are to be diverted along the route of the proposed pavements within the site to ensure that connectivity between the roundabout to the north-east of the site and Llanfoist Primary School is maintained. A green travel financial contribution secured through the 106 approved at outline would help to improve pedestrian links and or public transport in the wider locality. The site itself will be accessed off the existing A465 off-slip, not from Gypsy Lane, by the construction of a new roundabout junction and connecting carriageways. And the highway alterations will involve the creation of approximately 110 metres of two-way section of carriageway along the line of the existing one-way off-slip, the provision of footways, cycleways, controlled crossing point, and a new roundabout to access the site. And the A465 off-slip will be reduced in length and will terminate at the new roundabout. And this arrangement has been agreed through the previous planning permission, DC 2008-00818. So in terms of highway and parking arrangements within the site, highway officers have confirmed that parking standards have been met. The proposed road layout is simple in design, and members should note that there has been a change to the position set out in the report, in that the roads, footways and drainage will now be offered for adoption by the council as highway authority. And there is therefore no need to apply the conditions set out on page 15 of the report, i.e. conditions 1 to 6 inclusive. LTP policy S4 sets out a requirement in main towns and rural secondary settlements for sites with a capacity of 5 or more dwellings to provide 35% of the total number of dwellings on the site to be affordable. The provision of 13 units in this site, which is 20% of the total, complied with the previous UDP policy in force when the outline planning permission was granted, as well as the Section 106 agreement relating to the outline application, which I mentioned before, 2008-00818. As a consequence, the provision of 13 affordable units would be acceptable in this instance, as the reserve matters relate to the outline planning permission, and it is not now possible to require a higher proportion of affordable homes because the LDP has been adopted since the outline consent was granted. The 13 affordable units now proposed consist of 6 one-bedroom flats, 6 two-bedroom houses and 1 three-bedroom house, and these are set out in one cluster that includes 9 plots, and then another featuring the affordable flats, the 4 other units, which are served on a different road within the site. With the site being relatively small, it is difficult to pepper pot them in more groups around the site, and given that the 2 areas of affordable housing are accessed differently, it is considered that this arrangement is acceptable. It is also worthy of note that the previously approved scheme for 44 units offered a lower number of affordable houses, i.e. 9. And in terms of 106 contributions, which were secured within the outline permission, the higher number of houses now proposed, 65 instead of 44, will secure larger sums for education, which is based on the formula of £3,000 per dwelling unit, off-site recreation provision, also £3,000 per dwelling unit, and green transport contribution, £650 per dwelling. So taking all that into account, I'll just quickly run through the street scenes and other photos. There are more detailed plans on the front there, in front of Mark and Shirley. Those are the street scenes. You see the 2.5-storey dwellings are right in the middle of the site. They're not on the periphery, which I think sometimes concerns members on some of the other sites in the vicinity. Those haven't scanned very well. They're actually better detailed than that. But you can see the house has got sills and sub-sills, porch details, and there's also sills and sub-sills front and back. Again, it hasn't scanned very well, that. I'm afraid there's actually better detail on the plans in front of you there. But again, sub-sills, porch details, chimneys. That's the rear of the conservatory. Again, hasn't scanned very well, I'm afraid. That's a reconstituted stone version. And that's a group of sort of townhouses, the 2.5-storey houses. And there's a garage details. So we'd recommend approval.
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you, Phil. For the benefit of the public at the back, we've been joined by Kate Bingham, who is the planning officer dealing with this application. Anybody wonders who Kate was, sat down there. Right. Martin, you wishing to speak now first, please? You have 6 minutes and 2 minutes to sum up, if you so wish, at the end.
Thank you, Madam
Right.
Chair.
Thank you.
Well, it seems like Groundhog Day, really, this. Cram as much as you can into Linfoist, as usual. Well, where do we start? 44 houses on 1.6 hectares were pretty good. And I think that was just about bearable. But going up to 65, that's not 30 per hectare. That's 30 per hectare works at 48. So obviously you've crammed as much in again and took away all the green spaces, no green spaces whatsoever. As for the enhanced wetland pond area, I think Phil should be an estate agent. It's a swamp. I think it's only there because the rainwater drains off there. It's a bog. It's nothing nice to look at, that's for sure. But it might have newts in it. As regards the safe routes to school, well, there's no need for that because the school's full. So all the children's got to be bussed all the way 2 or 3 miles, whatever it is, to Derry View. Good for Derry View, no good for Linfoist, and no good for the kids, of course. What else could we say? Yeah, well, you need the Section 106 for education to pay for the buses, I suppose. So that's about it, really. So thank you very much.
Short and to the point. Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to comment at all on any of those observations, Phil, or leave it to the committee? I'll let the committee and then come back to you.
I think we did check the density of it, because I think, it says at least 30 anyway in DES1. If you look at the actual density there, it's probably on a similar density to the housing that's already been built next to it. So, I don't think it's actually out of kilter with the character of what's there alongside it.
Right. Councillor Clark?
I was glad to see, Madam Chairman, as our officers are last taking note of what we say about roofs. My only question is, are these the roofs of the affordables or just the unaffordables?
All of them.
Or these elevations here are all of them, are they?
No,
but it doesn't.
There's a selection of them.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If I was to look at all the elevations of all the houses, would they all have roofs on them that we like?
Yeah, they're down there, yes.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And can we, I gather, talking to Mrs. Clark yesterday, that we do condition our applications now that these roofs will be put on as per the drawings. We have an estate outside of Waitrose, just across the road, where what we said in this meeting was totally ignored, and they did not put proper roofs on, and we've got flush eaves and barges on there, and they look poor. So I just trust that when we approve drawings at these meetings, we actually receive these roofs on site.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Right,
It's
thank you.
more easy, it's easy to enforce.
All right, and one other thing, I don't know whether the officer would be happy, but if we can recess the windows in and put a return of half a brick, they do look an awful lot better than windows which are flush to the outside.
We can ask.
Condition that, yeah.
Thank you.
Reveals, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, then Councillor Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am in favour of this for one reason, the fact that we've got some more lower cost housing, smaller houses, because not everybody wants to live in massive big houses, and there is a need for small houses for young people starting off. Regards to the school, the fact that it's full is because when it was first built, people from in Abergavenny itself and from in the Derry View catchment, many of them thought, oh, it's a nice school, we'll go to it. And because there was room then, because these houses hadn't been built. As the years go on now, because these houses will have been built, these children will have more access to the school than people from other parts of Abergavenny. And we have got surplus spaces in Abergavenny schools, and it would be better if the children went to the ones nearest to them. So that I think that'll happen. It's only because while there were spaces there, children from out of that catchment came in. That should level itself out as it goes on, hopefully. But I'm in favour of this, especially because there's some more reasonably sized houses.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell. Councillor Jim Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Firstly, it's observation, and secondly, is question. I mean, in relation to this proposed development, the developer is not going to offer the development for adoption. Now, the comment I want to make on, sorry, am I?
Sorry, I did say, Jim, you might not have caught it because my report, my presentation is quite rambling, wasn't it? So,
okay, fine.
I did mention that they are going to offer the roads for adoption. So, yeah, that was the case at one stage, that they weren't going to offer them for adoption. But Mark, are you in discussions with them? Or?
Councillor Higginson, Phil is correct. Initially, they hadn't considered offering them for adoption, but during the planning process, they have intimated their willingness to offer them for adoption, hence the comment. But as I say, they are looking to offer them to us to adopt in the future.
Councillor Francis Taylor, please.
A couple of questions and observations, Chair. Can you point out to me where the amenity space is on that site? Because unless it is the pond or swamp, as Councillor Hickman calls it, because it looks to me like it is fairly densely packed together. That's the first question.
Yeah, there'll be actually an on-site play area in here, and then there's much wider, sort of, as part of the overall, there's like a linear walk through to the countryside here, and down here. There's actually on the countryside here, where there's all sorts of open space opportunities for people, and it will link in here to Llanfoist itself with a linear path that's going to go up towards Gypsy Lane itself. So, and that's that's probably similar to what was approved before under the 44, isn't it? Yeah. Within the site.
But within the site itself, it looks like the open space is fairly minimal in terms of the integrity of the site, because where you're pointing to the pathway to the other site, the other site of that is going to be developed for B2 use, B1, B2. So how much will there be? There'll be a significant buffer which will act as open space on that pathway, that side. Will there?
Yeah, 10 to 15 metres.
But it is an actual, green space. We've talked on a number of occasions, because quite frequently, if there is a site there, it's quite possible that eventually there'll be a further site, and that's what tends to happen. So it is a concern that there does seem to be very minimal open space, community surveyed open space then in that site, from my point of view.
From our perspective as an authority, what we're trying to do under the green infrastructure policy now is to actually have less some very small equipped players which aren't very well used. You're a springy chicken situation. Actually create opportunities for links to existing green infrastructure, i.e. countryside. You see they're opening up all sorts of opportunities here to actually go into the countryside from the site. So rather than have a sort of couple of play areas within here which aren't really used very much, it's better to actually provide one
that is actually going to be adopted by the authority, the recreational team, but actually then open up opportunities for residents to actually use the wider areas that are actually more interesting and more diverse. And also that will help with, this will help with the wildlife and biodiversity aspect of green infrastructure as well. So I think it's just having a different approach, getting away from this old hierarchy where lap on one side, and X amount of open space on the other, and actually think out of the box a little bit more.
To be clear, I'm not talking about formal play areas. I'm talking about green space where because if you look at the where it's linked to the other site, that is looks quite densely packed. There, you have to come out of the site almost to reach open space. I think that is the point I'm making. There isn't a green area, which we've talked about on many occasions when we've considered applications within the site, that becomes a community space that's surveyed by all of the community. I understand what you're suggesting about having links into the open countryside, and that is very welcome. But in addition...
This isn't a big site, though, is it? It's not Merton Green, where you create a village green because that's hundreds X.
But if you add it to the other site... If you add it to the other site, though, with respect, it becomes a reasonably sized site, I would say.
Yes, but Llanfoist links over to the other side where there are other open spaces. It's not just this kind of
I think it's still a concern, though, that we do keep talking about having, what would be traditionally community surveyed spaces for young people and older people and people of all ages to use as, to encourage community cohesion. We see very little of that, and we still seem to be seeing very little of that. That's one point. That's a concern to me. The second point, and this is a point of, well, I'm confused, to be frank, with regard to the affordable housing. So the vast majority of the units on site seem to be two-storey dwellings, traditional sort of family homes. The affordable homes is very much one bedroom. What you said didn't tie up with what it says in the report. It says that there are 13 affordable units, consist of one bed, one cluster that includes 9 plots, and then affordable flats, which adds up to me to 13. You mentioned a 3-bedroomed house. So that doesn't seem to fit with what's in the report. That's the first question. The second question is that what we need in that area? Is that why we have only gone for 1-bedroom properties, or is that simply because that's what they wanted to squeeze on the site? So my question there is regarding need. And also, further to that, obviously, the numbers do not comply with what we currently require under the new LDP. But it says that's because there's a previous Section 106 agreement in place. So I'm slightly confused. If there was an outline application and we entered into a Section 106 agreement, then the developer came back and said, well, actually, now we want to put a higher density of housing on there. And we're saying, oh, well, it's okay because you've entered into a Section 106 agreement. Can any developer do that? And will we say, oh, well, you're actually supposed to have 35% of your homes, but because you've already entered into an agreement, or, let's say that density rose. And it just seems to me that it seems they've put in a new application, but we're tied to the old Section 106, and that's confused me, and it doesn't seem appropriate.
Okay, I'll just handle that point first, and perhaps Shirley can mention the mix of housing on the site. The outline planning permission is the planning permission. That was granted the 2008 number, which was granted in 2010. That was granted under the old LDP regime, which requires 20% proportion of affordable housing. And the Section 106 relates to that. The Section 106 relates to that. Now, what happens after that? They come in with what's called reserve matters afterwards, which are effectively discharge of conditions applications. The outline planning permission still governs how that reserve matters operates, okay, in terms of the numbers of affordable housing we can ask for. So what they did, they came in with the reserve matters after the initial outline was granted back in 2010 for the 44. And what they did, well, we don't want to implement that. We will come in with a revised reserve matters. So it still relates back, keeps relating back to the outline. So the reserve matters isn't a standalone planning permission in its own right. It always links back to the outline. Okay? If they'd submitted a full application, because it was radically different in terms of the how, perhaps the access or some other element of the scheme, which this isn't, then we could revisit it in that the principle of development is still at stake. But I may have confused you even more by saying that. But in other words, the outline planning permission, as long as they adhere to that in the reserve matters, well, they are, yes, they are. No, that was the reserve matters consent was for 44 units. The outline was for residential development. It didn't govern a number. And what they've got to come in there for, therefore, the reserve matters is then the layout, the number of houses, the precise access arrangements with driveways, the public open space within the site.
If it doesn't relate to numbers, why are we tied to the numbers on the affordable homes? Are you with me? Or not? You
yes, because yes, exactly.
Yes.
If
So
they were coming
that's
in
what
with a
I'm
fresh
saying.
outline application, if they were coming in with a fresh outline application, we would apply 35%. But the outline planning permission was granted at the time of the UDP, and that's 20%.
Why are we tied to the 106 agreement for the proportion of affordables if there was no number of houses on the site in the outline application? Are you with me?
No. The way the outline, it depends on what.
This percentage of the number.
The Section 106 agreement sets out that 20% of the total number of housing units granted, eventually under the reserve matters, following the outline plan permission, will be affordable. So all it says, it sets a proportion. It doesn't set a limit or a number of houses to be granted. It sets out a proportion.
So we could go back and ask them for more affordable homes?
No, because we've already said 20% of whatever they build there will have to be affordable.
So actually 20% of 68...
65 is 13.
Yeah.
560.
The mix.
If we can, Councillor Taylor, I'll ask Shirley Wigan to give you some answers, please.
There's a few words missed out of the report. It is actually 6 two-bed houses, 1 three-bed house and 6 flats, and that's what I asked for based on the need.
Because that seems...
Yeah,
Can we then be sure that what is agreed, if that's not what's in the report before us, then we make sure that we get that?
It is what's on the layout, though. There's just a mistake in the writing of the report. It is on the layout.
So we've had this issue before where what says in the report, so it's just to be clear. So actually, that seems more normal, that seems more usual to me, and I was concerned that we were asking for 13, as it says in the report, one-bedroom flats. That's what it says.
Does it? It says six one-bedroom flats, that's what I read out, 6 two-bedroom houses and 1 three-bedroom house.
No, 5.8.
Hmm?
Under 5.8, it says...
Is there?
The 13 affordable units now proposed consist of 1 bed, 1 plus...
Sorry, which page are you on?
5.8. Okay, so in 5.8 it says the 13,
Right, okay.
are you with
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Affordable units now proposed consist of 1 bed, 1 cluster that includes 9 plots,
Yeah.
then affordable flats, 4 number units, which
Yeah.
is actually 13 one-bedroom flats, which is not what we've agreed, but it's what it says in the report, so that needs to be...
Yeah, it's a typo, yeah.
It's quite a big typo.
I did read out what was proposed, but obviously, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the report won't be the part of the planning permission, it'll be actually what they've submitted on the drawings, which is 6 one-bedroom flats, 6 two-bedroom houses and 1 three-bedroom house.
Which sounds more normal.
Yeah.
And finally then, the issue, we never seem to get these pepper potted properly around
Yeah.
the site. They are always clustered, and I mean, I can't
Yeah, the policies clusters up to 10 and then pepper pot, you know, after that, yeah. So the problem we've got, lots of our sites aren't that big in Monmouthshire. You haven't got the hundreds and hundreds of units that you'll get in the sort of brownfield sites in the cities, like Newport, for instance. So it's easier to pepper pot on a bigger site, isn't it, where you can have subgroups of 10 dotted around sites. I think in the context that will not be a cluster which will be harmful to the amenity of the wider area, or, you know, be difficult to manage for the housing association.
Thank you, Phil. You've really glossed over that a bit, because I think management in a small area doesn't really come into the equation if you've only got a small number. Yeah, thank you, Francis. I've got a lot of hands up. Councillor Powell.
Thank you. Just a small thing. I understand that Francis is very concerned about these green spaces. I live in an estate of 142 houses. It was built about 25, 30 years ago. We have 2 fields, and they are fields. They're not little patches, bigger than this. And the one's an amenity site, and the other is a plain field if the children want to use it. You very rarely see any children ever on those spaces. We have children in the site. They go off to other places, play football with friends, but you hardly ever see them being used. So even if you have them, it doesn't necessarily guarantee they'll use them. It's a shame. All that happens is that Monmouthshire County Council comes every so often and mows them. And that's all that happens to them.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor David Dovey now, please, and then Councillor Edwards, then Councillor Harris. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Taylor has raised one point which I was going to, and I'm not sure whether she's got the answer that she wants, or indeed I have, but the thing of matching the style and design of houses to the demand, I don't know whether that has been answered fully, or it is one where the developer has looked to see how much he can cram on the site and gone for that as an option. So I'd like to make a couple of general points, really. We've said that these we can't pepper pot on this estate because it's a rather smaller estate than some of the larger ones. Well, if we're going to do that, it is more essential on a small estate like this that the housing, low-cost housing, whatever, is seen to be in accord and not different. It must blend with the other houses, or they will stand out as low-cost housing, and that will not be good. It would not be good at all. I refer back to the housing that we've got in Chepstow, the last ones that were built on Bayfields, and you could go down there and you would be hard-pressed to know what is the low-cost housing and what is the private. The other thing that really does worry me about these developments where the number of dwellings put on them is squeezed to the full, and I share the concerns of the sitting member, is I just wonder what we're allowing to be designed here for the future, looking down the line. I think in many ways we're not making any bigger progress than was being made when they were building estates to provide workers for Llanwern. The density of these places is really, I believe, 20s, 30s almost. It is far too much. I think it is far too much. You will get here with this exactly the same problems that you suffer in the Bulwark, where the roads will be too narrow, people will park on the roads, you will not be able to get the emergency or other vehicles through, and you will end up with similar sort of problems that we saw yesterday in Caldecott. I really don't think we are doing these right, and I think the developers are getting away with a lot. And again, I will say, I'd love to see the final designs of these houses, that there is proper facility for them to collect their waste refuse and store it properly, so it accords with the council's policy on recycling and that sort of thing, not some little cupboard that somebody thinks up is a tokenism. And the other thing, if we want to keep the roads clear, I would want to see on this development that there is some sort of traffic furniture that stops people from parking on the car parks, on the road, and they should use their own parking spaces. When we were at Caldecott yesterday, there was enough cars, and God knows how many caravans, and I even saw one place with a boat as well as a caravan in there. So, you know, what we're allowing to happen is difficult. But I am really worried about these developments, and those are the points I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Edwards now, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. You know, Councillor Taylor's got it right, hasn't she? You know, this question of 20%, 35%. It is a real tragedy that we have missed out legally on the 35% of affordable housing. There's such an acute shortage of affordable housing, not only in the county but throughout Wales. It seems to me that the builders, the developers of these sites should be far more leaning towards providing much more than they do at the moment. It's all very well, and I know that the senior planning officer was saying about you're getting 3,000 for this and 3,000 for that, and it's a very substantial sum of money they can provide. But at the end of the day, we are still looking for accommodation for people who would desperately need housing. You know, we've been assessed as a county that we need 5,000 new houses within a sort of 10-year period, and it's a great shame that the developer has not been persuaded to meet this 35% application. All right, so it means he doesn't make quite as much money on the site, but at least we would be meeting the needs of human beings rather than... sorry about that. So I have a great deal of sympathy with what Francis Taylor has said. I think we should have been. It's a great tragedy we don't get the 35%. Councillor Powell touched on the question of school. The school is full in Llanfoes. Of course, this is one of these typical examples where you build a school and then put the housing afterwards, and it should have been the other way around, of course. That's what should have happened, and we would not have been inundated in Llanfoes with school applications for people who live in Abergavenny and could well have gone to Cantref or Derryview. Derryview is still 100 places short, apparently, and no real sign of filling it at the moment. And then, of course, my final beef, and I keep saying it, is solar panels. When are you as officers and whoever's going to do the planning, maybe it's got to go to the Welsh office, when are we going to get solar panels as standard? It's going to make life that much easier for people in future, where you've already been told about the astronomical costs of developing barrages, wind farms, etc., etc. If every house had an element of solar panels in their roofs, then electricity would be provided for them by in natural way. And very important that we do go down this avenue.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I found it very difficult, if not impossible, to hear what Doug was saying there. So if I say anything that is
microphone, please, Doug.
Said, I apologise. Oh, right. Okay. Maybe you didn't hear, but I didn't hear a lot of what Doug said. Some comments. It's interesting that we may be talking about having to transport a lot of children a long way away to another school, and a lot of that is because a lot of people in the place where the other school is have transported their children to the very place that we're talking about now. So we haven't got, we don't inflict, if you like, catchment areas. So you know, the children in Abergavenny go all over the place, and particularly if they can not go to a certain school. Anyway, a couple of questions for Shirley, please, just to confirm things. Can you confirm that the specification of affordable housing is usually a better spec than the stuff that's for sale around them? And secondly, could you read out again the number of units that are due to go on to this site that seem to differ from what's in the report? And if it is different to what's in the report, can we have that down as a condition so there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever about the number of affordable units that are going on there and what type they are? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Could you do that, please, Shirley?
It's 6 two-bed houses and 6 one-bed flats and 1 3-bed house. And that's what I asked for. As you know, we've got a huge need for single persons accommodation everywhere, not just in Abergavenny, and we've got a need for 2 beds because of welfare reform and people downsizing. All the affordable will be built to Welsh Government DQR standard.
Sorry, I just add that that's a typo in the report. That doesn't bind us to that. It's the planning permission lies with the actual documents submitted, and they clearly set out that what Shirley has said. The drawings reflect what Shirley has said.
Yeah,
so.
I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that in this place it was absolutely plain, that they
Perhaps-
couldn't come along with
Perhaps
it.
Richard will minute that,
Yeah,
the mix
it's
of
not that
houses that
on the
we've
paper, and therefore
we've talked about.
Thank you. You happy with that, Councillor Harris, now? No. Councillor Harris? Are you happy with that answer now?
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair, yes.
Right, thank you. Right, anybody wishing to move? I think we've debated that. No, you didn't want to sum up, did you, Councillor Hickman? Right, thank you. Right, would somebody like to move? Councillor Murphy? Seconded by Councillor Powercar. A show of hands for approval, please. It's unanimous, I think.
Unanimous,
Right.
yes.
Thank you very much, Rob. That was unanimous. We now go to the last application today, and this is in Mardy, Abergavenny, on page 28.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah. So this is a site that members are very familiar with. It's one we've been to several times over the last few years. If you remember, planning consent's been granted for a pair of semi-detached houses on the site. The current proposal seeks to move away from that and actually build a retail unit of 190 square metres net floor area on this site. I'll just run through the photos. Members, we met there yesterday and looked at the site. Was the car park of the public house, which is now a dwelling. Again, that's looking back at the cottages in Nantgavenny Lane on the left-hand side. And just looking back at them there, they're set at a lower level. They're very small, sort of traditional cottages, so set lower down. And then that's looking back at the old New Inn, which is now a dwelling, and the car park, which is used by residents actually, but is actually privately owned, and I think residents are just taking advantage of the moment that nobody's stopping them parking there at the moment. And that's showing the site in context. The site is in there. The actual dairy farm housing allocation for 250 or so houses up in this corner. and the actual little neighbourhood centre that's the shopping centre is the post office and the Premier Inn in this area here, and that was Mardy Park. Look, if you remember, we went to look at the car park site there last time. So the site is broadly very close, about 150 metres away from the existing small shopping centre, if I can call it that, in the development plan. So that's the site plan. That shows the retail unit proposed in the sort of top corner of the site. That's where the actual former public house is. There's about 12 metres between the two. The site's a lot lower than the main road, and it's proposed to keep it down as low as possible, keep it single storey with a very shallow roof, so as not to impinge on either the converted public house, now a dwelling, and the cottages in here, and to make it fit neatly into the locality without being too dominant. And sorry, let's just go back. There's parking for 8 cars in the area just off Nantgaveny Lane. Proposal for a new footway along here. If you remember, there's no footway. Taking out the sycamore tree and then creating a better visibility display of 2.4 metres by 90 metres in this direction to improve visibility. 8 parking spaces around this area with room to turn a commercial vehicle to come in and out, and delivery area here and a parking space for a staff member here. That's the rear elevation that would face onto the converted, the old pub. You can see how much lower it is than the roadside. The roadside's on the left-hand side. That would be the elevation, the front elevation, if you like, with the doorway to the right-hand side, facing onto the newer properties on the opposite side of Nantgaveny Lane. You can see where the neighbouring dwellings are in Nantgaveny cottages. You can see that the proposals has been as kept down as low as possible so as not to impinge upon the neighbouring properties. That's the elevation that will face back towards Nantgaveny Lane. Oh, sorry, no, that's the main road elevation. Sorry. And then that's what would face back onto Nantgaveny Lane, the cottages in Nantgaveny Lane there. Oops. So I'll just go back to the layout. So in terms of policy, we've looked at this and we've employed our own retail consultant to actually advise us on this to ensure that the development, if it is recommended for approval, wouldn't be likely to harm the vitality and viability of any existing town centre or neighbourhood centre. Our consultant has concluded that effectively this store would actually operate as an additional shop unit close to the neighbourhood centre. The only impact it would have in terms of retail impact would be on the existing grocery stores within the centre itself. So they wouldn't have a wider impact on the town centre or any of the shops further away than this. It's offering a local grocery store. It's not offering a sort of a wider pull retail offer that more than the local population of Mardy would actually walk to or drive to. It is actually offering off-road parking facilities, unlike the existing facilities on the main road, so that any impact is considered to be very, very limited. And the conclusion from our retail consultant was that in effect it would act as a competitor to the existing, if you like, the existing shops within the retail centre, and then that's a matter really of weighing up whether this would be just as well serving, or if not better serving, the local population than one of the existing shops, because they're so close together. And the conclusion was that this actually could provide a better retail opportunity for the local population than the existing facilities within the centre. And indeed, the post office is actually shut, and I understand that the Premier store is likely to take over the post office franchise, so that that would be the main, if you like, grocery competitor with this particular store. But on balance, the conclusion was that the retail impact would be tolerable, and that the proposal would actually offer potential for enhanced opportunity for shopping to local residents without impinging upon wider areas, and that it was a case of pure competition between this and other local shops. So it was, which isn't a planning matter, and which is certainly the impact would be tolerable in planning terms. In terms of impact on local residents, we think that's been handled sensitively, and the scheme could go ahead without having an adverse impact on the amenity of existing residents, because it's been kept low and separating distances are reasonable, and it is set down below the road, and any fencing or railings along here have been designed to reduce any harm to amenity. So there is a highway improvement there. Members may wish to comment on that after yesterday's site visit, but this was negotiated through discussions with Highways, and it's considered that this will actually provide a distinct improvement in the existing situation. So we would recommend approval for this proposed retail unit.
Thank you very much, Phil. The local member isn't here, so I'll take the adjoining ward member first, please. Councillor Edwards, is that you?
No, Roger.
He's gone.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, right. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I'll allow you to speak first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm the post office closed some weeks ago and is now embedded into the Premier store? And I checked it out yesterday, and I must admit, in my humble opinion, I don't think this development would have any detrimental effect on that store. It's very small, very tiny, and I think possibly that the owner of the Premier store did a wise thing by taking on board the post office facility. I really got nothing much more to add. I'm very contented that this development goes forward in view of the considerable housing stock that's going to be available just up the road there. I think it's a very welcome addition to the village of Martin.
Sorry, on Councillor Edwards' point, I did mean to add that members, there was a discussion on site briefly yesterday about potentially restricting items sold at the store, and one thing was mentioned was potential for restricting post office counter facilities to prevent adverse impact on an existing facility, and that is something that we could consider as a condition if members are minded to approve the application. There's also a need to actually impose condition on opening hours, and I appreciate that they're quite wide, 7 a.m. till 9 p.m, but it would be sensible to add a condition on opening hours so that it doesn't open too late into the evening in terms of protecting residential amenity.
Following that, Phil, it would be the noise of deliveries if it was too early in the morning, even if it's open, the delivery time, could that be a bit later? And also lighting, whether it's late at night or early in the morning.
We could certainly condition deliveries to be at a less antisocial hour.
And the lighting.
And lighting, I wasn't clear that they were actually where the lighting was going at this stage. We could put a condition that any lighting is agreed with us, including its timing.
Thank you. There seems to be a lot of...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Right. Councillor Powell and Councillor Murphy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Actually, the post office was at the post office. They used to open at 7 in the morning, so I used to get my papers on the way to swimming when we lived out there. No, going back to the... I agree with everything that Councillor Edwards says, because I think there's plenty of people to go and shop there, because it's quite a lot of houses now without the new ones, and I think that is fine to have another convenience store for people to pop to, and I can't see anything against it myself.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Francis Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. Picking up on what Phil just said about restricting the usage to prevent post office, I think we ought to be careful how we say that, because as the post office is just closed and the Premier store is an extremely small one, I don't think we should preclude the opportunity of this store having the post office in the event that the other one closes. So we might like to think about the wording of that. Otherwise, the post office could be lost to the area. While Phil and Paula are thinking about that, just a point for Mark, if I may. I appreciate we've got a vastly improved visibility display now, But I'm still, although I accept the point about the width of the carriageway, I'm still a little bit concerned about that corner. Now, I know the argument is that, that if you smooth out a corner, people go around it faster. So that's one thing there. But I am a little bit concerned about the narrowness of that lane. And if we could think about whether or not we could build into this some improvement to that junction, because it is extremely narrow. And if we could go back one slide, Phil. Yeah. If we have a look at the corner opposite that road is a footpath. It looks.
There's another road.
It doesn't look, but it is, isn't it? Yeah. It's a footpath. And there was concern raised by a community councillor, and I think she had a really valid point, that a lot of the pedestrian traffic to this site, which I have no problem with whatsoever the site itself, is likely to want to cross the road at that point. And I just wondered what provision we could make. I think there's a bus stop there as well, isn't there? Actually opposite there. There seems to me to be an awful lot going on in what is a very busy road with heavy vehicles from Pontroides, sawmills. I think somehow it would be nice if we could get a pedestrian crossing in there to improve pedestrian safety. But how we do it, I really don't know, which is over to you, Mark.
For me then, Madam Chairman, thank you, Councillor Murphy. The $20 million question, I suppose. The actual footpath you're referring to, I think, is best described as a stopped-up existing village lane. It provides access to properties there as well. You know, it's a no-through road, but it's actually dual use as it is as well. I accept the fact that people walk into the store have to cross Hereford Road, but we have to consider that Hereford Road is a 30-mile-an-hour road. And in my time with the local authority, which is now on 8 years now, I'm not aware of any complaints regarding excessive vehicle speeds on Hereford Road in that location. I'm sure that any local members will correct me if I'm incorrect in that regard. The issue of trying to provide a crossing is very difficult because of its proximity to the junctions, the existing bus stops, and the width of the existing road. I don't think a control crossing at this moment in time would be appropriate because the volume of pedestrians is not great, and the volume of traffic using the road and its speed is not excessive either. And to fit in an uncontrolled crossing, again, because of its width, we may well struggle. But I don't see any problem at this hour is considering and looking for the developer to fund some pedestrian crossing points, i.e. drop curves where pedestrians, we can define a suitable crossing point so they can cross the full width of the carriageway. The less ambulant is at carriageway level. Parents and mothers and with toddlers can push their buggies across the road rather than having to drop down off curbs. So I think that's something that we could consider, albeit at this late stage. But that's all I could really look to secure, in my opinion, from this development.
Okay, I could just come back there, Chair. As I said at the outset, I'm not opposed to this development at all. I could just see there was some potential problems. So if we could build some sort of mitigation of those problems, it can only improve the situation.
Thank you, Councillor. One thing that concerns me is on that sharp corner there, if there is still a sharp corner there, if it's not tapered here, I mean, if there's something coming in to go in there, if it was tapered, at least you'd have room for a car to sort of slip. Because you're going to have, if there's a car coming up here, and it's a single lane, isn't it? And there's one in a hurry to come in, there's nowhere for it to go.
I don't disagree with you, Madam Chairman, but I think the officer who dealt with the application has considered it, and if you don't mind, I brought a pointer with me so I could point, is that this is an existing car park which has high use as well, and the dray lorry and whatever serving the pub used to use this lane. Plus, we've also approved, it mustn't be forgotten, the smaller units to the bottom. So the traffic flows and the use of the lane has already been determined. And the increase in heavy goods, and I'll use that term very loosely, because I'm expecting this to be lighter goods vehicles serving this unit. Their ability to access has already been determined through the previous applications, and the number of trip generations from those vehicles is going to be significantly less. I think the issue we've got, if we widen that radius there, we are going to increase the entry speeds of any vehicles, not just delivery, and that is residents, the existing retail, planned industrial units and so forth. So that the potential for conflict and, God forbid, impact on vehicle collision will be greatly enhanced if we widen the junction radius, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mark. I can see the logic. They have to stop.
Absolutely. I think the general consensus now in the sort of traffic engineering that confusion is good. It makes people think before they act, and slowing down to almost a standstill is only good.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody? Councillor Edwards, then Councillor Dovey, then Councillor Francis Taylor.
I want to come back really about the pedestrian crossing, because it was a point, Councillor Murphy was right yesterday. You know, there was quite a strong representation, and actually since I went down to the store deliberately yesterday to have a look at it, there is a pedestrian crossing immediately outside which leads to Marley Park. So Marley Park and the Premier store more or less opposite each other, and I suppose cars parking on that side of the road, whether illegally or illegally on double yellow lines, so, helps to slow down the traffic. But you do have a major headache on that road, and that is Pontrilas Timber. You know, time and time again, we've had complaints over the years about Pontrilas lorry drivers going down that road, and I would have thought that as a highways officer, Mark, you should seriously be looking at the possibility of putting a pedestrian crossing outside this store, because there is a lot of people going to on Greystones, which is just up the road there, and then over and above that you then have the dairy farm development. And I think you should be seriously contemplating whether sooner rather than later that you put a pedestrian crossing in.
Or roundabout.
Me, Madam Chairman, I'll attempt to answer that. I think to refer to one particular company in terms of a haulage company using that road because of the size of the vehicles, I think the overall issue is the speed of the vehicles and the ability to cross within the traffic. I appreciate that large vehicles are daunting to all of us when we stood on the side of the road, but the first thing we have to determine whether a crossing is required is whether it's safe to cross between the traffic in normal circumstances. And as I said earlier, to my knowledge, this isn't a highly trafficked and highly speed area. So it'd be difficult for me to justify and insist upon this development funding a considerably expensive control crossing.
Thank you, Mark. You've agreed to disagree. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Dovey, was it next? And then Francis, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too am concerned about the entrance to the side road. This is an entirely different retail outlet to anything that is in the area. It is what it says. It is a convenience store, and as such it will sell a very wide range of products, including fresh products, meats, etc., and there will be frequent deliveries from that because of shelf life nowadays. People need the stuff to be with short use-by dates, etc., on them. So you are going to have delivery vehicles coming in there to service the store. You are also going to have, if the store is to survive, a significant number of car users coming in there in addition to the ones that use the vehicles that already use the units and whatnot at the bottom. I'm concerned about the fact that there is a very limited amount of parking there. I believe it's going on for 3,000 square foot, that store, say about 2,500. And that will need to be pumping out some money, so a good customer turnover for it to be profitable. So I'm concerned about the parking. I'm definitely concerned about the route into it. I think the car parking isn't big enough, and I'm concerned about the route into it. I wish the store every success. It will, of course, not only attract if it's successful. If they go for a symbol group, I'm sure they will go for a symbol group. Nowadays, it's the only way to get your booze and whatnot at the right sort of prices. If they go for a symbol group, then they will be attracting people not only from the local community, they'll be attracting people that will want to come in and go into there and get quick top-up food without going into the town. So you get people coming from the hinterland as well as just the local community. This store is a different thing to anything else that is in the area. And I think we need to think carefully about that road junction. And if I was a gentleman, whoever it was, I'd try to squeeze some more parking in there somewhere as well.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. Councillor Francis Taylor, please. And then Councillor Anne Webb.
I was going to ask a couple of questions about the residential amenity. There were obviously 12 neighbour representations. I was rather surprised that no one was speaking today. But in terms of the proximity, it does say quite clearly here that when we looked at the two semi-detached houses, we insisted that they were 12 metres away from the windows of the side elevation, the side elevation of the houses at Nantgyfenny Cottages. It does also, this says it's going to be 11 metres, so it's already closer, and it's not a house, is it? And it also says that it's quite close to, it acknowledges that it's quite close. I can't remember where we're reading it, sorry, my computer keeps going off. It does say that it's thought that the amenity will not be seriously harmed. So that suggests to me that we acknowledge that the amenity will be harmed, although not seriously so, which is a slight concern, because when it came as an application for a pair of semis, we spent a long time considering it, a long time considering the proximity to the houses. This is not a residential application. It's actually rather a large unit. It looks completely different from anything else in the locality. I'm not terribly sure I'd want to get up and look out of my window at that, have to say. I do agree with Councillor Dovey about the numbers of, it says it's going to have one staff space. I appreciate that meets our guidelines, but I mean, I've got convenience type store in my village, and I can tell you that it causes chaos because there was never enough parking associated. I'm concerned about the effect on residential amenity, and I'm concerned about the number of spaces for people to use coming in to the store, and also staff. I mean, it would seem a nonsense to suggest that there's going to, I know people can park elsewhere, but it doesn't look as if there's going to be a lot of obvious places to park in the proximity. I know Roger will say, oh, we're always worried about parking, but, when people are coming to get something quick, they'll park anywhere. I can tell you that for nothing. So that's my concern. I, in its current form, I don't think I could support it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Phil wants to answer.
Can I just mention about amenity? Yeah, in terms of the distance between the Nantgyfenny Cottages and the side elevation there, Yeah, there's about 11 metres between the windows of Nantgaveny Cottage and the eastern elevation of the proposed shop. The difference between this and the housing scheme is for a two-storey side elevation side onto the Nantgaveny cottages, and obviously that would be much higher than the proposed store there, which is single-storey in height to eaves. It's actually 2.5 metres to eaves, so you can expect a two-storey dwelling to be appreciably more than that, albeit 1 metre further away. So you don't really get up to the two-storey element until you're well past 12 metres to the two-storey element. And even that is only, I think, 3.5 metres high. So, the highest part of the building is 4.4 metres to the ridge, which is still well below what you would expect a two-storey dwelling to be. So, yes, and the test is significantly harmful. I mean, most developers will have some degree of harm to cause. If you build something fairly close to somebody, there will be some degree of harm. But that's not. The test is significantly harmful, and that's set out in Planning Policy Wales, and the court cases have set that out to be the test, as well as it being enshrined in LDP policy. So I think we'd be reasonably happy that this won't have a significantly adverse impact on residential amenity. I appreciate that some people won't want it here. But they may well be using the facility if it does get built, because it'll be right on their doorstep. And in terms of parking, it is compliant with the adopted parking standards. I think it's for eight on-site dwellings. Mark, I think you checked that, didn't you? That it is compliant. And you can't actually design out for every eventuality, unfortunately. People will park in an ad hoc manner occasionally. But we don't live in a perfect world, and all you can try and do is provide for what is reasonable, and this proposal really tries to do that, I think.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Webb and then Councillor Dovey.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Councillor Dovey is considering the Budgeons shop in his ward with regard to the parking, etc. There isn't as much parking there as there is in this site. I think the visibility out of this site is good. I walked out and had a good look on the Hereford Road, and the visibility is good. And as Mark quite rightly said, when it was used as a pub, there were people going in and out all the times of the day and night. There's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on that road also, which could be enforced. And I would like to recommend approval of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillor Dovey?
Could you tell me how many parking spaces there are on the site then, Phil? 8. Well, to say, I don't know where Councillor Webb has been when she visited the Budgeons store in my patch, because the number of parking spaces on there are probably around about 40. Yes, you go and count them. Yes.
Thank you. We're
But
dealing with this application
anyway,
here today.
that-
Thank you. Councillor Higginson,
That
please.
isn't the point I was going to make, Madam Chairman, because
But in relation to this,
could I just finish my point? I'll be very quick, because the point that will happen, and it's a point Frances made about the convenience store near to her, when that gets filled up, when those spaces get filled up, you will have people parking down that road as well, because as she said, they'll park anywhere when they want to get to the store.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to say that in each of the 4 visits we did yesterday, there was no objections to any of them. And particularly this one we're talking about now, the concern was that corner, really no more than that.
For refusal?
1 against. So the application is approved.
Right. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you for your attendance today, but could you hold on for a couple of minutes, please? Right. To remind you that site visits for May will not technically be May, it'll be on the Friday, so please be aware that it'll be a Friday because it's bank holiday on the Monday. And also, Phil has something to announce about the inspectorate, please.
Sorry, yes, the morning before the next planning committee, on the Tuesday before the general election, we're going to be visited by Mr. Thickett, who is the Mr. Thickett. No sniggering, please. He is the head of the inspectorate in Wales, and he's, if you like, the chief inspector. So he's coming to give us a presentation, but he'll also want to be open to take questions from members. And if you remember, we did have a visit from the previous head of the inspectorate.